filming this question and answer video in Wisconsin. I'll let you guess whose garden this is. You'll know later in the next 3 or 4 days, because there'll be some video content from here as well. The weekly garden planner is $50 off for the month of October. You can use the code that's on the screen over at the website. Thank you for anybody who's considering it. And again, there's been some new content added to it over the last 90 days or so, and we're continuing to work on that. There was an open garden. I already put the tickets up for the open garden for next year, just because it was easy to kind of cut and paste them from last year, and so they're already up. But I had an issue where it was only allowing people to buy 1 ticket at the time, and I fixed that. I don't know what changed year over year, but if you need more than 1 ticket, you can buy more than 1 ticket now. And the seed video from Pine Tree went up this last week, and I did link their website down below that video, because they have a different website name than Pine Tree. If you were looking for it, I think if you Googled Pine Tree garden seeds, you would find it easily. The video went up with this past week. We did a garden center video with our friend Steve Castorani. Before you see this one, there'll also be like a top 10 video from his garden of things that are still flowering in the fall. I really enjoyed making those videos with Steve up in the Philadelphia area. And then the Pine Tree garden seed video went up this past week as well. Not a whole lot of people have watched it. It's some of this content we do on the road, I realize, is a little bit different than the content we do in our own garden, more teaching gardening and that kind of thing. So there is some, I'm sure we're darting all over the place all the time. It's just kind of explains who I am, if we're being honest. Okay. There's 20 questions for this Sunday's question and answer video, so I'm going to dive in to them now. This person's in zone 6A. If they're planting marginal plants, what are some strategies to help them survive? Going to be a little more information coming up on this with the person I'm filming a video with in this garden here in Wisconsin coming up this week. But you know, I think you probably want to plant more things in the spring overall. I do think there's probably a cutoff period, especially if the ground freezes solid in your area for planting. Now, things that are really tough plants or some deciduous trees and things like that, if you can get away with digging, you can probably get those things in the ground. I mean, you're probably not going to kill some deciduous shrubs, Weigela or forsythia or something like that if you're planting them while they're dormant in the winter. Again, as long as you can dig. I mean, if the ground freezes, you're probably not going to want to. But again, once in the south, the further south you go, the more fall is probably beneficial for planting. The further north you go, the more spring is probably beneficial for planting. We want to get a season under stuff for the most part. The first year things are in, they were asking about watering and that kind of thing. You need to make sure you have consistent moisture, but I always say moist but not wet. I mean, that's kind of the ideal, and almost every plant kind of thrives in a space where it has water when it needs water, and but doesn't want to sit in it, with some exceptions. There are plants that just like to grow in the water, but for the most part, we're just trying to find this balance, and the main thing is watering deeply and then allowing some, letting it dry out some in between. We want to force plants. The one thing you don't want to do is just water and water and water in that same spot over and over and over again, because, daily or something like that, because what reason would the plant have to actually root out into the surrounding area, right? So if it doesn't dry out a little in between waterings. Let's see. And that's, and then fertilize in the spring. I wouldn't fertilize in the fall if you were going to do any planting, but when you're planting marginal plants, for sure, we would want to do in the spring. Hardy plants we could still probably do in the fall for the next 4 or 6 weeks. Okay, this person planted a Japanese maple last year in zone 8A, but it has settled down to grade. So they mounted it up some when they planted it, but I did a how to plant a shrub video maybe 2 weeks ago. That video went up. Hasn't been watched a whole lot because you guys have been watching the channel for a long time and know how to plant a shrub. But hopefully people will find it in the future, and it will be helpful to those who are new to planting shrubs. But I talk about in that video, if you dig way deep, sometimes that loose soil that's at the bottom it'll resettle in time. The weight of that plant and, you know, everything else is going to settle. So even if you left it up some, you know, it's going to sink back into the ground a little bit. So I leave things up pretty proud of the ground because I know it's going to sink back in just a little bit for sure. When I put a plant in the ground, in the hole, and realize I've dug too deep, when I pull it out and put some soil back in, I make sure I pack that soil down a little bit. Not crazy, but just get some of that air out of there, so that'll at least reduce some of that settling. Anyway, this person's Japanese maple settled down to grade, and now they're worried when they mulch this next season, it's going to, you know, be up on the trunk some. You know, if it's been newly planted, I'd go out there and dig that sucker up and raise it some. Sometimes you don't even have to take something completely out of the ground. You can just put a shovel on each side of it and just kind of figure out a way to tuck some soil underneath it to get it raised back up. If it's been in the ground longer than that, you just have to know on a plant like this that you need to let the mulch thin out right at the base of the plant and not be piling it onto the trunk itself. What I would always do on landscape jobs, I realized after, you know, I've been self-employed since I was 25-ish. And now I'm 55-ish. So I've been self-employed for 30 years, been in the horticulture industry for 40. But that 30 years, 20 of it, 18 of it, I was landscaping, self-employed. I realized pretty early on I was never going to teach my guys to mulch without burying the trunks of things. So I would just have them go mulch, and then I would go around at the end of every job and pull the mulch away from the trunks of the plants a little bit. So that's my strategy mulching, is I'll mulch and then go back in and pull things back just a little bit. I think that's what you'll need to do with this Japanese maple if you can't just raise it some. Okay. This person says they're confused about leaving the leaves in their perennial garden. So they have a Norway maple that's near their perennial border, and it can drown them in leaves. There is a limit on how much stuff you'd want sitting on top of it. Generally speaking, perennials aren't going to have much of a problem coming up through leaves. They'll have more of a problem coming up through that triple shredded hardwood mulch that I use at the house, which forms kind of a cap on the top of it. But generally speaking, they don't have much of a problem with leaves unless the leaves get super thick. So there's a moment where it goes past being a good insulator and holding moisture in place and that kind of thing to becoming a nuisance of potentially keeping something too wet, preventing light from getting through enough that your perennials can break dormancy in the spring, maybe keeping it cool for longer in the spring and not allowing them to come up until much later, like, who knows? So that's the way I do leaves. We leave our leaves in the garden, but the white oak in the back corner drops them this deep. Well, I can't have that, so we just take some of those leaves and redistribute them around the garden a bit, and that's how we do it. We don't have any leaves basically dropping in the front garden, and so we'll take some out there if we need to. So, you know, a reasonable amount of the ground being covered in leaves is fine. When you get 3-4 inches plus of leaves, that could inhibit your perennials in the spring or keep them too wet and rot them during the winter. When you transplant in the fall, is it a good idea to prune back some of the shrub as you would often do during the growing season? You know, if it's a deciduous shrub, the Caryopteris was in, Steph wrote these down and I'm guessing Caryopteris was in the question. Your deciduous things with no leaves, when you're moving them in the wintertime, you may be able to escape without doing any pruning on them. Maybe even some of your leafy evergreens during the fall or winter moves when you're moving them. I always do the cutbacks when I'm late spring or summer transplanting things, because just kind of put them back in balance, because you're reducing the root size. And so I want to reduce the top of the plant a little bit to compensate for that. I've always found that's a good strategy transplanting. Reduce the top because you've reduced the roots. When you're fall or winter transplanting, it's not quite as important because the plant's not trying to put on growth on the top. So it's got a period of time to get roots reestablished in the spring before it starts to leaf out a little bit. So it's not as important. But if you want to go through and tip prune a little bit, it's also not a bad idea. It's not something that's going to hurt anything either. Will we overwinter our tropical plants and bulbs? So most of our tropical bulbs or tubers, dahlias. There's lots of dahlias behind me. We'll talk about that in the video that's upcoming from here about storing them in the winter, but we don't have to store them in Raleigh. We're right on the line of where dahlias will come up year over year without winter protection. So we leave ours in the ground. We expect to, the ones that have only been in the ground for 1 year, we expect to lose a couple of those the first winter. But the ones that do survive will just come back year after year. Our elephant ears are fine. Most of those things are fine for us. We're right on the edge of where they're fine. And so I leave them in the ground and just hope for the best. Any of our true tropical plants, we do have some house plants that we move in and out. We have some on our back screen porch. And then there's a few things I'll just let go. If it just seems like it's gonna be a hassle the whole winter to bring that plant in, you know, maybe I just let it go. We're lucky enough, I don't have to think about this until November. So, you know, if you're in much colder areas of the country, your tropical plant maintenance might be 6 months out of the year. For us, it's only gonna be 3 or 4 months out of the year. So that's part of my thinking on it too, right? Is I don't have to, I don't have to do it as long if I do decide to keep something over winter. But a lot of times we'll just let a couple tropical things just go. This person's taking down a black walnut, and can they safely use the wood chips? Are they toxic? Do they need some downtime first? Everything compost, that stuff will compost out of it. So the wood chips aren't an issue in the future. And I don't even think they probably initially are really. So I'm not gonna worry about this at all. I'm just not gonna worry about it. I think a lot of that black walnut thing is just kind of overdone a little bit anyway. I mean, we go into gardens all the time that have giant black walnuts in them, and people are gardening around them. So the juggling issue is an issue somewhat, but it's more for some things than others. I understand things like tomatoes and a few other things, not that you grow tomatoes under a shade tree, but like there are some plants that are super sensitive to it. But most plants are able to adapt to it pretty well. And then when things, you know, when we compost things, a lot of these kind of issues kind of go away. The juggling issue goes away, and the black walnut, you know, if it was very acid material, it will compost toward neutral. If it was very alkaline material, it'll compost toward neutral. You know, most of these things fix themselves in the composting and the worms and everything breaking it down. So I don't worry about it. Let's see. This person overwintered a bird of paradise inside their home last year. Can they leave it in the shed instead? They don't have a garage. No, I think the thing's gonna need light. It's an evergreen plant. You know, if it's something that went completely dormant, like these dahlias, you could store them in the dark. Caladiums you could store in the dark would be another one that I didn't think of just a minute ago. Elephant ears, you know, those things you could store in the dark, because that's how they would still be stored under the ground. They'd be dark. But something that stays evergreen up above the ground, like a bird of paradise, that's going to need light during the winter. So I think you did it right last year. Probably what you need to do this year as well. This person said it seems like a roller coaster of weather, plants declining and then thriving other times. They're a first-year gardener in Charlotte. Has this been a typical gardening year? Is every year a roller coaster? There's always going to be something thrown at you every year, it seems like. But I would say that this year was particularly odd, because I think we're going to finish the year in Raleigh up for the year in rainfall, but we will have been in drought situation the vast majority of it. We got, every rain we got, it seemed like it was like some sort of epic event, you know, that, you know, required boat building, you know, to survive. And that's not the kind of water that actually penetrates the ground. And so we've had this constant battle where the top of the soil is kind of wet and it's drier underneath. We had 2 full weeks of 100-degree days during the summertime. Luckily, luckily when we had the open garden, that wasn't one of them. Hopefully it won't be next year either. But no, I wouldn't consider it typical. Steph and I left the house, went to New Brunswick, went to Nova Scotia, went back through Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont, and we've made our way all the way over here to Wisconsin, and it is just dry everywhere that we've been so far. Somebody got water this year, but it just wasn't any of the places we've been so far. So I think that, no, this is not typical. And, you know, hopefully next year it'll be a more even ride. Plus, first year of anything, you're going to learn a lot from it. So, you know, take these things as learning things and not, you know, apocalyptic things. This person bought acid-loving plants for containers. How best to add and stabilize acid conditions in containers for help to plants? Most of the products you buy for potting soils, peat moss, pine bark, most of these materials are going to be have a low pH. You can actually test the pH in there if you want to, but typically just the adding of and replacing of those materials, almost any bag product you're buying is going to be slightly acid or very acid material. So I don't think you're going to need to probably do anything unless you're seeing your acid-loving plants have chlorosis, which will be a yellowing of the leaf where the mid veins stay kind of dark, you know, where you have the green, darker mid veins. So, you know, I would wait to see if you have any symptoms of something before you, if you try to preempt it, you may go too far the other way. So wait and see if you have a problem. I doubt you will. This person's in Atlanta. They have a little Miss Figgy in a container. When is the best time to plant it in the ground so it has more root room to grow? I would get it in the ground sooner than later. So I don't think it really matters in zone 8A in Atlanta. You're not going to have an issue. It's better off in the ground than it is in that container because it freezes solid in that container. The roots are more susceptible to damage than the top of the plant. So once you get the roots in the ground, then you know you don't really have to worry about the top of the plant in Atlanta, Georgia. Give it a little bit of room because they do get a little size on them. They're dwarf figs, but we're talking about a dwarf of a tree, of a thing that can get 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So it still gets some size on it. Let's see. This person was asking about fall into winter watering. How does watering change as seasonal winds give way to cold temps and plants go dormant? How does watering change? Well, for us in Raleigh, it hasn't changed at all, except for we got a little bit of rain a few days ago. Apparently, we weren't there, but apparently we did. But you know, fall tends to be a dry time for us, but we tend to go into it in pretty good shape because August tends to be a pretty wet month. But this year that wasn't the case, and so we're dry in Raleigh. So it's really about, I mean, all of these watering questions can be solved with a moisture meter. You know, probably need to put a moisture meter down in the ground several inches and see if it's actually, you know, if it needs water or not. You should need, water goes further. The nighttime temperatures should be cooler, and the watering that you're doing will go much further than it did in July. July, you'll move the watering around, and by the time you finish the garden, you'll need to start over again watering, right? But in the fall, you can probably water and then take a break, right, from it. But it's about monitoring is the same. The amount of water to apply is less, or how often you do it would be way less. What is one botanic garden in the Southeast you would go to this year if you had to choose? Fairchild in Miami is one that should be on folks' list for tropicals. If you like tropical plants, Fairchild should be on your list. The ABG in Atlanta is probably, to me, might be my favorite garden in the United States, the Atlanta Botanic Garden. And we've been to a lot. We were at Holden and Cleveland, Holden is just to the east of Cleveland. Cleveland Botanic Garden is downtown. We filmed at those. Those videos are upcoming. The Holden video will have already gone up. One of the Holden videos, I think I'm going to cut that one into two because it's like 55 minutes or something like that. Those gardens are fantastic, but this person asked about the Southeast. And Steph and I are lucky enough to get to go to a lot of them. I do like Gibbs, Brook Green, Duke in Durham, right near us, is one of the great ones. Of course, we have several. If you came to the open garden, you know, we have lucky enough to have the Ralston and Juniper Level Botanic Garden, maybe top garden in America too. I mean, I put it right there with the Atlanta Botanic Garden, and it's only open a few weeks out of the year. and it's open on the Friday before our open garden for you guys if you want to come and see that one. And then, Bell and Grath down in Mobile. I talked about it a little bit last week. What else would I think of for the Southeast? Callaway's in Georgia. That's a good one as well. I think I said Gibbs already. I'm going to miss a few, but there's some great gardens there. But if I'm putting my top, I'm going to give you my 3 best. I'm going to say Juniper Level Botanic Garden, because it will just blow your mind. You will leave there thinking you know very little about plants. It's humbling. And then, because there's so many things there. And then the Atlanta Botanic Garden is just an unbelievable oasis and right beside it, downtown. And then Fairchild in Miami. Let's see. This person has Stinkhorn mushrooms all over their landscape. Is there a way to keep them from returning? Does their presence tell us anything about the garden? Yes, your garden is now part of nature. We get them seasonally, so we had more Stinkhorns this year. It seems like I had none last year. It's just, you get different mushrooms different years. Sometimes you'll get those dog vomit yellow fungus that forms across the ground. Sometimes it's those Stinkhorns. Sometimes it's other ones. Your garden is part of nature, and wood breaking down is where those fungi attach themselves to. And what you're looking at in the mushroom part is the fruiting part of it. So there's a much larger piece to that up under the ground, and occasionally it comes up and gets a little sunlight and fruits, basically. Nothing to do. You're on the right course if you have these things. This person has a hibiscus, a native hibiscus. They want to move it, or they moved it to a temporary bed at their mom's home because they're moving. It's super happy. Now they want to divide and transplant it back to their new home, and leaving some for their mom. She wants to leave some for her mom. When to divide and transplant? I would probably wait on these native hibiscus until mid to late spring. I'd probably wait to see that thing breaking dormancy in the spring, and then I'd pop it out of the ground and cut it and move it. That's one that I would probably not do in the fall. If it's super, super happy and resilient, you may get away with doing it 12 months out of the year. It may not matter at all, but that one's one I'd probably put on my late winter list. This person has a 15-year-old white Sasanqua camellia in Pensacola. The 9-inch snow they had down in Pensacola, which unfortunately really hurt some nursery businesses on the Gulf Coast. Steph and I were visiting some in the late winter, and one of my friends' nurseries down there we weren't able to visit during that time. I hope we'll put him back on the list for this year, because he had substantial loss of shade structures and that kind of thing. We're hoping that all that has been recovered from at this point, but acres and acres of shade structure destroyed from the snow. But the top half of it died back to that point. Now they have some straggly new growth coming from the base. That's normal sometimes. If you get snow on something, sometimes you get the white ball effect above it, where you get really, really cold. There's nothing to moderate temperature when there's snow on the ground. So what wind comes across it, and that temperature can just be the same. So the record temperatures that we've ever got, cold temperatures we get in Raleigh, are always based on a kind of a white ball effect, where we get snow from basically where we're sitting in Wisconsin, and it's all the way down to the North Carolina mountains. Well, then that allows that air to move across that whole area and then hit us with really cold air. It just doesn't have a chance to moderate as it goes across the frozen tundra. And that's what happened here, is you get that white ball effect where you get snow everywhere around you, and then all of a sudden the temperature just can't come up, and you get nighttime temperatures that can fall much, much colder than normal. And here's this leafy evergreen shrub from Asia that's not ever sat in anything like this, just gets fried. It's no big deal. Just cut that part back and let it go, and let the new pieces come up, and then select just 2 or 3 of those to keep in the future. I don't think you'd want it where it had 14 trunks down at the bottom. Okay, what is your wife's favorite salvia? So what is Steph's favorite salvia? She'd like for the Wendy's Wishes salvias to come back for us. Those are mostly hardy in zone 9, 10, and they are, you know, some of the really, really good ones. Mulberry Jam is one that we had that didn't come back, that died as well. So probably the Summer Jewels salvia overall. We do the Summer Jewels salvia from seed, so it's inexpensive. Some of them reseed, and so we have to cull a few every year, but the Summer Jewels lavender, very specifically, I think is her favorite salvia. Okay, they ordered an American high bush cranberry. It came as a tree form with 1 inch thick caliber, wanted a shrub. It is suckering, so it is okay to leave the suckers. Then the 1 inch leader died. Now it looks sad. Just prune out that top piece. It's almost the exact same question as that, just in a different area of the country, about that camellia that died back. Just cut the part that died back. Those suckers are coming up. Now you'll have the shrub that you wanted in the first place. But sometimes when these suckers come up again, you'll get 25 suckers. So you want a shrub, you know, that's kind of branched from the base. Let's call that 5 or 7 trunks would be ideal, not 70. So just kind of control that for a while. Pick some ones that are going away from the center just a bit, and then it'll create a nice shape in the future. Let's see. This will be the last one for this week's Q&A. Ask gardening questions down in the comment section below this video. That's where we pick from every week. We have lots of great questions right now, I think, and we're going to shoot a Q&A again with this YouTuber who I'm guessing most of you will guess. And again, the weekly garden planner is $50 off. Let's see. What are the best practices for transplanting peonies, zone 7B, 8A, and Charlotte? So we did a video on transplanting peonies, and ours are super happy in the garden in Raleigh. Peonies get dug up and divided, typically, you know, going dormant in the fall, you know, where I can still see that little piece sticking up from the ground. That's when I want to do it for us, because they go basically on top of the ground. You barely cover peony tubers when you transplant them. But for a lot of people, I think the best time would be maybe when they're breaking dormancy in the spring. You're going to get a little less out of them that way, because you're going to be doing damage to them as they're trying to come up out of the ground in the spring, and you're going to be dividing them, and you're potentially not going to have the best peonies you're ever going to have that first year. But if you go back and watch that video I showed in that video, how I did it, just search HortTube with Jim Putnam, transplanting peonies. The main thing is those tubers are almost on top of the ground, and they're almost just barely covered where you can't see them, and then lightly mulched over the top of that. 7B, 8A Charlotte, I think it's really important that they're near the surface, even more so than other people, for 2 reasons. Number one, we don't get enough cold on them during the winter for them to really perform extremely well. So I want them near the surface because that's going to be closer to the cold. And number 2, you have a clay-based soil, and that soil could potentially damage them as well if they were deep down in that clay. So there's a couple thoughts on transplanting peonies there in the Charlotte area. Thank you guys so much for following along with the channel and following along with our travels. Again, I know this content that we do sometimes on the road isn't the same, you know, as the home content, but you know, we order a lot of things from Pine Tree Garden Seeds, and so it was fun to go and visit those folks. We're lucky enough to have, you know, I've met so many people in 40 years in this business that I just kind of want to share that with the world. You know, some of the people, you know, amazing people doing amazing things out there in horticulture. So that's fun for us. We'll be back in the garden, you know, in a few weeks and be doing, you know, our more typical content. But in the meantime, I think we have some exciting things coming up, like I say, from the Holden, from Cleveland, from here in Wisconsin, and then out into Oregon very soon as well. Thanks for watching.